then I not only hear footsteps, but I sense a presence of someone or something right behind me. And then I feel the bed physically move and something physically coming onto the bed with me. And that's when I started to freak out. I thought it may have been Alexander, but that's when I realized that I could not move and I was completely paralyzed. I was kind of freaking out, to be honest, because I did not know what was happening. No matter how much I tried, I could not move. And there was this very distinct presence of an entity or a creature right behind me.
Welcome to Piercing the Shroud podcast, a testimonial archive documenting firsthand experiences that challenge the rigid mainstream understanding of reality. Each episode focuses on the raw events of a single experience, when it happened, where it occurred, and what was perceived, step by step, with as much sensory detail as possible. Worldviews, theories, and interpretations are intentionally set aside so the experience can speak for itself. I'm your host, CJ Hazley. Grounded and logical, yet I've had anomalous and mystical experiences that I cannot deny the reality of. From seeing UFOs and advanced technologies to psychic experiences like telepathy, precognition, and psychokinesis and more, I've seen firsthand that reality is much more complex than what we're conditioned to believe, and I'm not the only one. That's why my mission is to build an archive of firsthand testimony for curious minds, experiencers, and future researchers alike. These are real people sharing real experiences that don't fit the mainstream view of what's possible, and their stories deserve to be taken seriously and documented carefully. Welcome to Piercing the Shroud podcast. Let's dive in. All right. So how would you classify the experience that you're going to share with us?
I would classify this experience as sort of a sleep paralysis experience, if you want to get into the technical phrasing for it. However, to me, it is also more than that, and sort of an experience with an entity in what might be called a parallel dimension. But yeah, I'll let listeners decide for themselves.
And when did this experience occur?
This experience occurred back when I was 18 years old, and I was attending Bucknell University during my freshman year of college. And this was the very first day of classes when this occurred. I remember specifically it was a Wednesday morning when this experience occurred, and it happened to be on the very first day of classes at Bucknell during the fall semester of my freshman year when I was 18 years old. And I believe that might have been in September.
Okay. And how old are you now?
I am now 33 years old. So,
okay.
Yeah, this was like 15 years ago. Over 15 years ago now. Yeah.
And then did this happen during the day or night?
This happened during the early morning. So right when I was getting ready for my first day of classes early in the morning. And if you want to get into who was there as well, I had my two roommates.
Yeah, we'll get into that for sure.
Okay.
And then how long overall would you say the experience lasted?
This experience was not that long of an experience that we're going to get into, but it is very notable to me because it was one of my very first paranormal experiences in this realm. And but in terms of how long, I would say around 2 to 3 minutes in total.
And did time feel distorted in any way?
That is a good question. I've never really thought about that. Time did not feel so distorted. Space, however, did feel distorted it felt like it occurred in another realm, is what I will say.
Okay. And then was this an isolated incident for you?
This was an isolated incident of the specific sort um, of experience that I'm going to describe. However, it did end up connecting, I believe, to other later experiences that I've also had with what one could call entities of another realm or dimension.
But prior to for this one, it didn't seem to this was a first for you at the
Yes.
time?
Yes, this was a first for me at the time. Yeah, exactly.
Okay. And then you established where you were already, physically, which was at college, and where?
Yes, and I could be more specific. I was at college in my dorm room with my two roommates and also in the room, at least actually one of them at the time. But I was in my bed, um, awake in my bed, at least so I thought, awake in my bed, uh, a small bed, and I was lying down, facing the wall of my dorm room at the time.
Okay,
But
so, like, curled up, like, facing the wall
yeah, I would say that
on your
on my
side.
side. Yes, on my side, facing the wall.
And then I'm going to be asking this question to everyone just for classification purposes. Were you under the influence of any psychedelics, drugs, or alcohol?
Only some DMT. No, I'm kidding. No. Yeah, no, no drugs, no alcohol, maybe natural DMT, but yeah, no drugs, no.
Right. Purely endogenous.
Yes.
And then okay, you said that there were others in the room at the time.
Yes. So, thinking back to that moment when that um, profound life-changing experience happened, that was I was in the room with my I had two roommates to preface. One was named Carter. He he bunked he slept on the other opposite side of the room as me, and also Alexander was my second roommate, and he slept sort of to the side of Carter, and I had my own side of the room. But to get back to your question, I believe when this experience happened, that actually only Carter was there. That
Okay.
Alexander was somewhere else. He was attending his early morning classes.
Okay, and then was this other person asleep or awake and moving about the room?
The other person was asleep. Yes,
Okay.
Carter was asleep.
And then as far as you're aware, you were pretty sure that Alexander had already left.
Yes, at least so I thought at the time. My memory is to be honest, of Alexander is foggy, but it is relevant that at least I did think that he was when this experience happened, I did believe that he was outside of the room.
Okay.
Because I did believe that he had a very early morning class, like
Mhm.
maybe an 8 a.m. class that morning, and so he was getting ready and he was, left for his class. I when after this experience happened, I do remember Carter still sleeping, and I believe that Alexander was not there, but, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and then was the room dark?
The room had dim lighting, but it was not completely dark. It was
Okay,
it
like
was in
early
the
morning
morning.
light?
Yes, yes.
Okay. And then as far as you aware, were you during this experience, were you awake or dreaming, falling asleep?
I was fairly lucid from what I remember. During this experience, I was fairly lucid. Perhaps I was sleepy, um, maybe a little bit half asleep, but still fairly lucid because I remember having lucid thoughts. I remember opening my eyes and seeing the wall that I was facing in the dorm room and then closing them again. and just having lucid thoughts about where I was and how, uh, one of my roommates had left for his classes. So, yeah, but maybe a bit sleepy, but that's really it. Yeah.
Okay. And now moving into the what, was this transition from your normal state kinda sudden or gradual?
It was gradual. It was so gradual that I didn't even realize that there was a transition, but there was a
Okay.
transition. Yes.
And nothing unusual, like, it didn't seem like anything unusual, like, was, like, segued into this?
Not at the time. I
Okay.
did not sense anything unusual until about midway through this experience was happening.
Okay.
I thought I was completely just lucid awake and in this realm. Yeah.
Okay, so from there, let's, dive into it chronologically with as much detail as you can remember, including,
Yeah.
like, thoughts you were having at the time, the whole experience as
All
you
right.
remember it.
So cool. Yeah, this was one of my very first paranormal experiences that woke me up to these types of events. So, as I was saying, we've already established the setting. I was lying on my side facing the wall. I remember opening my eyes at one point and shutting them again. And as far as I can remember chronologically, I heard the door open in a very, very distinct way. So, this was not at all vague, not at all fuzzy. Very distinct door opening. The door was behind me, and then the door closed very distinctly. And I remember that. And what I was thinking at the time was that my roommate, Alexander, has had very lucid thoughts. I was thinking that my roommate, Alexander, was back from his morning 8 a.m. class. That's what was running through my mind. Then I hear footsteps, very gradual but very distinct footsteps.
So,
And they
like,
were,
walking slow?
yes, walking slow, yes, walking slowly and quite eerily. And it was more eerie due to the fact that he was not walking towards his side of the room like I thought he would walk. He was walking towards my bed. And remember that I thought that this was um, Alexander. And I'm not bigoted in any sense, but I feel that it is relevant to add that Alexander is also a gay man. So I thought that Alexander was walking towards my bed while I was lying on the side facing the wall, and I heard these footsteps approaching me from behind.
And this is first day of college, so it's not someone you know super well either.
No. Yeah. No. So not someone I know super well, but I did know that he was a gay man. And he, well, I heard footsteps. Then I sense, not only hear footsteps, but I sense a presence of someone or something right behind me. And then I feel the bed physically move and something physically coming onto the bed with me. And that's when I started to freak out. And I thought it may have been Alexander trying to, well, you know what? But that's when I realized that I could not move and I was completely paralyzed. Um, and so what was running through my mind at that point is, well, I was kind of freaking out, to be honest, because I did not know what was happening. I think I may have read about sleep paralysis still before that, but I had never
Mhm.
experienced anything like that. And I just, no matter how much I tried, I could not move. And there was this very distinct presence of an entity or a creature right behind me.
Tell us more about, you said you sensed it.
Yeah.
So, like, what were you sensing? Like, what was the feeling that was coming from this sense?
It was a bit ominous, like it was trying to purposely, scare me or latch on to me, and in fact, I did feel it latch on to me. I did
Mm.
feel this entity, or what I perceived as an entity. The viewers are free to make up their own minds and interpretations, but, I did feel it sort of wrap its arms around me in a sense, and that's what I was thinking why I couldn't move. This thing has its arms around me, and I can't move. Moreover, so I sensed it. It has sort of a dark or ominous energy, and I also heard it.
So at
And
this point, have you already written it off? Like, this is not Alexander, or
yeah, yeah, I didn't think Alexander was that powerful that he could hold me in a place like that. So
completely paralyze your
in a
body?
way, I was kind of relieved, but then I was also freaked out. So
Um,
yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah, as much relief as you can at a time like that. So,
yeah.
okay, how did that transition happen? So, like, he's on the bed, and then how does that move into the latching on?
Yeah, so he's on the bed. I remember literally felt it physically, like almost like it physically like moved. And then I tried to move at that point, but I couldn't move. And then I felt something almost like wrapping its arms or tentacles, whatever you want to call it, around me. And yeah, and I was trying to move, but I could not move. I was paralyzed. I realized it wasn't Alexander at this point. It may have been some sort of interdimensional experience, but again, the viewers are free to interpret as they wish. And I also heard this entity, whatever you want to call it, and it whispered my name in a very long and drawn out fashion. At first, it said Mark, like something like that, but much
Mhm.
more wispier and hissier. Uh, and just yes, exactly. So CJ could do it a lot better than I can, but in general, it was very, very creepy. I would say that long, prolonged whisper was like maybe around 5 seconds, and then afterwards,
Okay.
it started making all these hissing noises, like very wispy, hissing noises, and I was trying to make out what it was saying because it did feel like it was almost trying to talk to me in a sense. After my name, I heard my name very clearly in that long, drawn out way, but as I try to tune back into this experience, I cannot recall making out any other words except for the fact that it kept on making these very wispy, hissing noises. And the feeling was that it was whispering in my ear, like directly into my ear, like it was holding me and whispering this directly into my ear, as if it was trying to cast a spell over me or something. But regardless, I was pretty freaked out. I could not move. I realized it was not Alexander at that point, and I was trying to break free while this thing was just whispering whatever it was whispering into my ear.
So it sounded like language of some sort?
Think of parcel tongue in Harry Potter. That's the best way I could describe it. It might be a
Okay.
cliche example, but it's actually a true example. That
Hey,
would
if it
be,
fits, it fits.
yeah, that was the best way that I could describe it as I think back to it.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then how did it progress from there?
Yeah. So that lasted for maybe around 30 seconds. It was not like that whispering parcel tongue sort of experience. And then I was just kept on trying to break free, and I just something told me not to be afraid anymore. So I was no longer afraid. I was more just like, hey, I'm more powerful than this thing. Whatever is trying to take hold of me, I'm more powerful than it. And I ended up uh, just breaking free is the best way to describe it. I broke out of it as if I was breaking out of a trance. And it did
Alright.
feel as if I was breaking out of a trance. right when I broke this spell, if you will, broke out, all of a sudden I just felt something shift, and I just sat up quickly in bed, and I realized that I looked back, but there was no entity that I could see. My roommate was asleep. And it was almost as if I felt a feeling as if I had shifted between dimensional spaces. That is the best way to describe it. Like I had tuned into another dimension or density of consciousness, and then I had tuned back out in a way. That's the best way I could really describe it. But
Mhm.
yeah.
Okay, and so was there, like, any do you feel there was anything, like, specific that you did to break out of that trance, or was it just the realization?
It was more just a realization that maybe, this was trying to teach me something, but that I shouldn't be afraid of this thing and that I'm more powerful than it. And I just think, with that mental realization, I had the fortitude just to break this spell or break out of whatever hold this thing had on me. Um, and as I tune back into this experience, yeah, I just remember being really determined, and just really trying to tune into my inner power and just saying, whatever this is, it does not have control of me. It cannot harm me. And I am more powerful than it. And maybe after, a few seconds, then yeah, I just suddenly broke free. Yeah.
And that and after that, like, you woke up, and what was going through your head?
Yes, I woke up from
Mm.
basically what seemed like a trance experience. And I sat up quickly in bed and I looked, and again, the feeling was like I had shifted dimensions almost. That was the feeling that I was going through my head. And my roommate was asleep. And so I looked over at my roommate. And then I was just thinking to myself, what the heck was that? And I just kept replaying it over and over. The door opening, the door closing, the footsteps, the movement of the bed, the whispering of my name, the continued whispering in parcel tongue, the entity wrapping itself around me and whispering in my ear. And I thought you know, at that time, I was becoming more open to this kind of stuff. And it didn't cross my mind when it happened, but after it happened, I had the thought that this may have been sleep paralysis because I have heard of that before, but I had never experienced it. But after it
Mhm.
happened, I'm like, oh, wow, this may have been an experience in sleep paralysis. Now, just because it's an experience in sleep paralysis doesn't mean it's not quote unquote real in a sense. Again, the viewer is free to interpret what that is. But if you want to put a label on it, a technical label, then you could put sleep paralysis on it. And that has led to
Right.
many other experiences, similar to that. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I would definitely classify this one as a sleep paralysis for
Yes.
sure. Okay, and, is there anything else that you feel we didn't touch on for the, like, experience? Any details left out?
For that specific experience, there's nothing really that I could add on to it. Again, it wasn't that really a long experience, but this really did trigger an awakening in me. And it led to many other really cool experiences that maybe we could touch on in future episodes. But this was really, it happened to happen on the very first day of college classes, very first day of college classes, which I think was also significant.
I
Um,
mean, that's probably a feast for parasitic entities.
yes, exactly. It was probably a feast. This thing was probably trying to leech on my energy, which I
Mhm.
completely believe after several other experiences that this is real. But yeah, that was the beginning of it, at least consciously, that I've experienced something like that. Yes.
All right. And so now we'll move into who you are.
Okay, well, that's a good question. I'm still trying to figure that out. I mean,
Give us your best guess.
but as a human being in this current lifetime, my name is Mark Sabas, and I come from a fairly, I guess you could say, scientific background. I was not raised really religious in any sense. My father is a physicist. He worked at the famous Los Alamos National Labs in New Mexico back in the 80s before I was born. And then he transitioned into medical physics in New York Presbyterian Hospital. And that's where I was born. I was born in New York. If you want to get into my whole background, my mother is immigrant from Calabria, southern Italy, and my father's a Greek Jewish immigrant, and yeah, and I was brought up fairly interested in math, science. In fact, when I was attending Bucknell, I was studying at first computer science engineering, um, but I later transitioned. I had a spiritual awakening, and I transitioned into studying philosophy instead as one of my majors, and I became very interested in lucid dreaming, astral projection, sort of seeing synchronicity everywhere. And I feel like, it became part of my sort of mission. I felt to sort of merge the science and spirituality, or at least infuse consciousness into the scientific paradigm. And I've started my own website, nothingtodoubt.org, in which I've written several articles about these similar topics. It now doubles as my author website. I'm also an author. I have had my first book out called The Monarchs, out for 1.5 years now, actually.
Okay. Nice.
And that deals as well. I've been very interested in psychic and paranormal experiences since this experience. And that book is a novel, a fiction book, but it deals heavily with sort of kids with telekinesis who are being experimented on at a military facility. And it also alludes to sort of MK Ultra and Monarch
Mm,
programming, but that's a
okay.
whole nother topic. Uh, but yeah, and that book has also won multiple awards. And so I'm pretty thankful about that. And,
Yeah,
you know,
I didn't know about this. I'm gonna have to go check that out. And you said it's fiction?
yes,
Or like
fiction.
sci-fi?
Yeah, sci-fi, visionary fiction, yes. Truth and fiction.
Right,
Visionary
right.
fiction deals a lot with, spiritual topics in fiction as well, but also
Okay.
it's kind of a genre bending book, but deals with this group of new youth children with large eyes and psychic abilities. The main character has exceptional telekinesis, but it's not very controlled. Um, and so, yeah, that's kind of been a passion project. I actually do have a day job as a financial analyst, believe it or not, but that's, on the side. I am an author, I'm a writer, I'm a human, at least I try to be, and I I have a sense of humor. And I as well, one other thing I would like to mention is I do teach classes as well on the side for the Aramis Creative Learning Center. I've been a mentor for them these past almost 4 years now, believe it or not. And
Okay,
that's all
nice.
virtual classes. It's something I do maybe it's 2 or 3 times a month, teach virtual classes for
Okay, cool.
The Aramis Creative Learning Center, which is headed by Sherry Divband, if any of your audience knows who she is. And that's all virtual for right now, she's planning to open a physical center. I'm very interested in Qigong. Which I've been practicing the last 3 years. I'm actually going to offer a free class of Qigong, totally free, in conjunction with that center later this month. And
Nice.
I've also been trained in remote viewing. Uh, I I've gotten the Voyager certificate. I was actually the very first one. I was informed, not because I'm the best, just because I'm kind of the first who signed up to receive the Voyager certificate from the Farsight Institute. Um, back a couple years back, which is
Nice.
hours of private instruction and scientific remote viewing, which is where you view a target and you don't even know what the target is, and then you get feedback afterwards. And I had to pass a test and receive my Voyager certificate. So I've been very interested in spiritual phenomenon, paranormal phenomenon, psychic phenomenon for many years now.
Pretty much since then, or
Yeah, pretty much since then. Yeah, that sort of
okay,
sparked the spiritual awakening in me. I was
and at
already undergoing sort of that process, but that was really the time when it first
right,
happened. Yeah.
and then prior prior to that specific experience, though, you didn't really have anything that like stood out.
Prior to that experience, in terms of psychic paranormal phenomenon, nothing that I can recall. Even my childhood, I was sort of open to this stuff, but I cannot recall really having any sort of major experiences. 'Cause I was raised more left brain, I guess you could say, but gradually I became more and more open to this, and that opened up my energy
Mhm.
centers and opened up, the possibilities to have these sorts of experiences. I've always been open though, because I do remember back in high school, even my freshman year of high school, I started getting into conspiracy theories. I watched Zeitgeist, the movie, freshman year of high school. I started getting into conspiracies, which I think is a rabbit hole that many of us go
Mhm.
down, realizing that the world that you were taught isn't exactly what, the world, I should say this, the world is much more magnificent and larger and more mysterious than anything we've been told. And I remember also back in high school, so that was freshman year of high school, and then maybe sophomore or junior year, around when I was 16, I began researching UFOs and ETs and realizing that there is also truth to that. So I'd say I still I would, even before that, I was actually pretty open.
Right,
I just
you
didn't
were
really have.
interested in the topic.
Yeah, I was interested in these topics. And I was just researching like Roswell, and I was thinking to myself, how do people not know about this yet? That this is real, that been all these high-ranking military officials that have given confessionals about this. So yeah, it's I've been quite open to these topics for a while. There was never a time when I was completely closed-minded, but I just remember freshman year of high school, the very first weeks, no, of college, sorry, like the very first week, someone asked me if I believed in God, and then I just looked up at the sky and I said, I don't know. So there was a time when I was sort of agnostic, but began to have more and more direct personal experiences that pointed me towards a larger consciousness that's operating throughout our universe.
Okay, and then
And
at the time of this experience, how would you describe your, like, mental and emotional state?
at the time of this experience, maybe I was a bit antsy due to beginning of college classes, and just, being a freshman in college.
Mhm.
Um, if I had to tune back into my emotional state, yeah, maybe a bit antsy, a little bit like nervous or excited even for uh my college classes, but I would not say that I was in a particular negative state or even a super positive state. I was just getting ready for college at the time. And I was getting, even I remember the summer before this, I was getting into these topics. Like I've heard about lucid dreaming the summer before that, because the movie Inception had come
Oh,
out
right.
around that same time. And I had a friend who told me that he could lucid dream every night and, uh, do fun stuff,
Fun stuff.
yeah, fun stuff. He was telling me he could like have sex with woman in the astral realm, and I thought, "Oh, that's cool. I would like to participate in that." Not anymore, of course. I've evolved past that.
A
I mean,
married man.
yeah, I'm a married man. But back then
Okay,
it was interesting to me. Yeah.
and
And
then,
that led into
uh
those experiences, I think, just being open to that. Yeah.
right, yeah. And then so neither of your roommates witnessed this to any degree, or did you even mention it?
I did not mention it, no.
Okay, did you tell anyone about it shortly after?
Not really. I mean, if I were to tell someone I had an interdimensional experience with an entity on the very first day of college classes, telling my roommates this, they'd probably just think I'm like, what the heck? Who the heck am I rooming with? Right. So I
Did you
was
tell
just trying
anyone
to
else,
fit
like
in.
family or
I was just trying to fit in. I did not tell any of my family at the time, but I did tell my friends. Yeah. I
okay,
remember
you did
telling
tell
my
your friend?
friends. Yeah, I told a group of my friends, close friends, that were back home. I didn't tell
Right,
anyone in college because I wasn't really close with
reasonable.
anyone at that time. Uh, yeah, yeah,
Yeah, that
so and they were
before
open.
and by the end of the semester, you were out there with a card that said the end is nigh.
Yeah. Yeah, it was, the school I went to was sort of a preppy school, you know,
Mhm.
Bucknell University. It was not really known to be any sort of alternative school, and so I was just trying to fit in, and honestly, I did that first year, I did have trouble fitting in, and we don't have to get into that, but yeah, I was just trying to be normal, just be a normal human. I'm
Right.
still trying to do that to some degree, but this is some days I'm better at it than others, but yeah, that was my mindset. Yeah, and I'm currently if you want to know more about me, I'm currently, I moved from New York. I grew up in New York, Westchester, New York, Westchester County, New York, and now I'm in the border of North and South Carolina, actually, south of
Okay.
Charlotte, North Carolina, and Pineville. And I met a woman here, and she's wonderful. And we're about to have our first baby in next
Con
month.
congratulations.
Yes, and I'm currently in the baby's future nursery where I'm doing the hair. Hence
It's a
the
nice setup.
animal paintings, yes. So, very excited about that. And yeah, still trying to just know myself in a way, but I think the most important thing we could do is abandon all beliefs, all egoic conceptual frameworks about who we are, and abandon everything that we thought we knew about reality, and just be open to all possibilities. It's kind of a cliche, but Socrates was the wisest man in Athens for knowing that he knew nothing. That's really
Mhm.
where we need to come from, just from a
Get
place
get
of
comfortable
obligation,
get
neutrality.
comfortable with uncertainty.
Exactly.
We have very little information of what's out there in the world.
Yes. Yes. There's a lot more that we do not know. Some beings may be looking at us in the same way that we look at fish in a fish tank or ducks swimming about a small pond. We live in this
Yeah.
very small band of
On a cosmic
frequency.
level, we live very short lives, and we have a very short history.
Yes, 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 yes. Um, for sure. And I've definitely had more experiences since then that have pointed me towards that same thing, and that there are beings and there are entities that may exist from just right outside of your present vibrational frequency in a way. We live in this very, very narrow perceptual band, if you will. And part of, psychic work, spiritual work is just opening up that bandwidth just a little bit to perceive what's always there, but you're just not privy to it before. Just like I sort of snap back during that experience into my normal frequency bandwidth in which I could not see or hear this thing anymore, but that does not mean that it wasn't there. Yeah.
Right, yeah, doesn't necessarily mean it was gone, but who knows? And, uh, thank you for coming on and sharing your experience, and Well, we're actually about to move into your second one.
Yes, excellent. Thanks, CJ.
Thank you.